Yeah. A very good afternoon to our three distinguished dignitaries present here this afternoon on the occasion of the 26th National Sahodaya Conference of CBSE schools hosted by the Bangalore Sahodaya Schools Complex. We are privileged to welcome Dr. Anil Srinivasan, Dr. Bindu Subramaniam, and Srimati Padmavati Rao, all globally acclaimed for their contribution to the arts in their respective fields, and more importantly, their work on integration of the arts into schools' curriculum. Thank you for accepting our invitation and honoring us with your presence here today. I also welcome all the participants who have registered in large numbers, and I request you to post your questions in the chat box so that we can take them after the speakers have presented themselves. To begin with, I deem it a privilege indeed to present before you Dr. Anil Srinivasan. As a highly respected pianist and a National Award recipient in 2010 for creative and experimental music, Dr. Anil Srinivasan's contributions in music have already been noted. As an educator, he is the founder of Rhapsody Education Through Music, a venture that has pioneered the idea of academic concept learning using music as a tool in schools. This acclaimed syllabus with 460 lesson plans are age-graded, curriculum-aligned, and consist of both musical exercises and applications, and also deal with musical training and expertise in addition to concept maps. Dr. Anil's outreach through Rhapsody now consists of some of the most prestigious schools in southern India and has 120 full-time trainers. Dr. Anil is a regular speaker at conferences, a columnist in The Hindu and the New Indian Express on music and the brain, and with an MPhil from Columbia University, specializing in cognitive neurosciences, Anil is a respected expert resource on child development for various organizations. Dr. Anil was recently awarded the Educator Extraordinaire citation from Rotary International, the Aspen Global Fellowship for Social Change, and the Ken Hobbs Citation for Social Responsibility. Dr. Anil is also an associate professor of practice at Kriya University, dealing with art, science, and cross-disciplinary ideas in education. We are immensely proud and privileged to have you here with us, Dr. Anil Srinivasan, and look forward to your presentation to this audience. Next, I would like to present before you another globally acclaimed artist who made waves at an early age when she wrote her first song at 7 and first performed on stage in Norway when she was just 12 years old. She won honorable mentions at the 16th and 17th Billboard World Song Contest for her original compositions and was a semi-finalist in the performance category of the Unisong World Song Contest. A singer, songwriter, entrepreneur, author, and music educator, described as a third-generation prodigy by the Hindustan Times. A Bangalore woman changing the way children learn by the Femina Karnataka magazine, and an assured young soprano by the Times of India. In 2012, she appeared on the list of the 12 Gen Next Achievers in the Verve magazine. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, we present with pride and awe the young and dynamic Dr. Bindu Subramaniam as our speaker for our session today. Dr. Bindu is the daughter of the world-renowned violinist Dr. L. Subramanian and has collaborated with him on a number of releases including Global Fusion, Visions of India, and Athens. Bindu Subramaniam is a singer, songwriter, entrepreneur, author, and a music educator. She has been performing on stage since she was 12 and her first solo album was critically acclaimed and nominated for a GIMA or the Global Indian Music Awards. Bindu is the Dean of Subramaniam Academy of Performing Arts, SAPA, an institute that trains musically inclined children to become professional performers. In 2014, she started the SAPA in Schools program, an initiative to create an ecosystem for music education in India. SAPA in Schools works with over 30,000 children in schools across India. Along with her brother Ambi Subramaniam, she started a contemporary world music band, Subramania, in 2013. In 2018, she created the Tair Sadam project with Ambi and Carnatic music artist Mahesh Raghavan. The Tair Sadam project has received millions of views online and have been featured across national media. Bindu chairs the Bangalore chapter of All India Management Association's Young Leaders Council and was a delegate of Australia-India Youth Dialogue in 2018. Earlier in 2019, Bindu co-authored India's first series of textbooks dedicated to teaching the Indian violin. She's now working on creating undergraduate courses in music education, technology, and performance. Dr. Bindu Subramaniam, our privilege and pleasure to have you on this session. Welcome to you, ma'am. Now, we have the third eminent personality of our session as we move from music to body kinesthetics. Mrs. Padmavati Rao, a renowned personality in the field of theatre and music. Mrs. Padmavati Rao began her career in film and theatre in 1977, having trained in Hindustani classical music with a deep interest in painting. She graduated in commerce from the Bombay University in 1982, and she holds a diploma in French. Beginning as an actress, she worked with luminaries in the field like Sri Girish Karnad, Sri Shankar Nag, and a host of eminent directors. She went on to work as an assistant director in the most popular television series, Malgudi Days, on international projects on film and television channels like Channel 4, ABC News, and Discovery. Ma'am has also written dialogues for films and television projects. For over 10 years, Mrs. Padmavati has been doing theatre with and for children. She's been deeply involved in human process work and is a trained facilitator. Mrs. Padmavati has also authored textbooks on life skills through theatre. Currently, she works as a freelancing resource person for storytelling and theatre for both children and adults. She trains children to use theatre in the classroom and has worked with teachers of private and government schools from across the country in Bengaluru, Delhi, and communities in the Himalayas too, in order to empower them to tell their own stories to a larger audience. She hopes to make theatre more accessible to people of varied age groups across geographies. Thank you all once again for your presence. We are indeed blessed and privileged to have three dynamic personalities on our session here this afternoon. Without much ado, let us move on to our session. So we begin with questions. I would like to ask the first question to Dr. Anil Srinivasan. Could you throw more light on understanding the brain and its development for children when exposed to arts integration? Dr. Anil?
Thank you, Basanti ma'am. I think I'm getting a feedback. Okay. Thank you so much. And that was a glorious introduction to all three of us. We should also say it's a great pleasure to be in this session. Could I just request you to mute your mic? So I think there's a feedback that's... Yeah. It's a great pleasure to be part of this session. Thank you, CBSE. Thank you, Bangalore Sahodaya. And thank you, Basanti ma'am, for having us as part of this panel. You've asked me the what we call the money shot question, which is the big question on how does the brain affect how does music affect the brain? and that is directly related to what I did as part of my work. And as an illustration, I'm just going to play something. It's much easier for me to play something than to talk. If I just did. Or if you are in South India, if I were to play or something like that, it is not only that you recognize the song or you recognize the tune, but as much as 90% of your brain is being activated. There is research now to show that when I speak a sentence of medium complexity, so a sentence of medium complexity is something like x plus y the whole square is x square plus y square plus 2xy, and we all know this formula. But because it has 2 or more elements to remember, so there is research that says that if I'm speaking this, about 30 to 38 neurotransmitters are being activated, most likely in your prefrontal and orbitofrontal cortex. But when I sing the same line, right, if I'm going to actually sing this line and set this to music, and you're going to receive it as musical information, 3,33,000 neurotransmitters are getting fired in the brain. So you see the differential between 30 and 3,33,000. And that's because music is not only working on your prefrontal and orbitofrontal cortex, it's also working with the amygdala, it's working with the dorsal part of the brain. Almost every part of the brain is getting activated as a response to music. And this is very easy. So when I played Choo Kar Mere Man Ko, not only did the brain recognize the tune, the song, the film, the singer, etc., but it's also putting in your mind the memories you associate with it, the people you connect with it, etc., and so on. When I played Kanne Kalaimane or something like that, it was automatically, I know a lot of people were automatically thinking of Sri Devi, or some people were thinking of the film, or, hundreds and thousands of things are getting fired, right? And I don't need like great cognitive neuroscience research. It's that when I say cognitive neuroscience research, you all take me more seriously. That's all it is. But you actually know this to be true, right? That the brain is getting more activated in response to music. So, and if I were to take an even simpler song, if I did something as simple as that, automatically all 3 of you on my screen, and I'm sure many principals who are listening to this are also smiling, because Happy Birthday is one of the most recognizable tunes. Now, you've sung that so many times in your life. And I've said this many times. That song was created by 2 teachers. It was created by Mildred and Patty Hill, and it was created in Pennsylvania. And that's the power of teachers. So I'm giving you the 2 necessary pieces of information. One is that music activates the brain physiologically, and there is an entire field on both neurobiology and neuroaesthetics which study the effect music has on the brain. And it is already conclusively proven that music has this humongous effect on improving not only emotional skills such as empathy and sympathy and moods and being able to relate and things like that, but also on memory, concentration, logic, looking at the connectivity between things, spatial reasoning, temporal spatial ideas, visual spatial ideas, and so on. So music is this very powerful accelerator of the brain's activity. And second, the most well-known song in the world, Happy Birthday, is created by teachers. Okay, so everybody has access to music. You don't necessarily need to be, as prolific, as a prodigy or a prolific as a huge performer to be able to access music. Like I said, the most viral song in the world was created by teachers, which A, shows the power of a teacher to influence mankind, but B, the ability for anyone at any given point of time to be able to access music, right? Not that I'm fond of quoting her, but Felicia Rashad, who's a theater personality, who was the star of The Cosby Show, for those who watched it, made an interesting statement. And she said, a child, before he learns to speak, learns to sing. Before he learns to write, learns to draw, because he's scribbling on the wall. And before he learns to walk, he's already dancing. right? So art is fundamental. Music and theater and dance and all of these things are fundamental. And it is activating the brain so much. So I know I speak for Bindu and Padmavati ji when I say that for people like us, arts is a way of life. I don't think we think of it as something outside the scope of what we need to do in academics. It's inherent in what we do, how we dress, how we speak, etc., etc. So to put it in a nutshell, yes, music has tremendous effects on the brain. Like I said, from 33 transmitters to 333,000 transmitters is the differential. And this is now neurophysiologically proven, right? And there are many substrates to it. There are many different theoretical bases to it. I studied a lot of neuroscience, which is why I have no hair left on my head. It's a lot of work to cover. And second, art is an easily accessible tool, easily accessible ally in our work in education. It's very easily accessible. It doesn't really require too much gadgetry. It doesn't really require, it's not artificial intelligence. It's actually natural intelligence. And that's I think the great power of the arts in education.
Thank you so much, Anil. I think the passion with which you speak is obvious. You don't need any preparation or paper. It's coming straight off the heart, not from the head, for sure. And a brilliant way of putting it across. Starting question went very well. Can I request Bindu or Padmavati Rao ma'am, if you have anything more to add on the same question? You could, or we move to the next question.
Sure. Firstly,
Bindu, would you
of
like
course,
to
I
add something more?
Agree with Anil. Sorry, I'm doing okay. Perfect. And I think the way you put it so articulately is just brilliant. And obviously, I agree with everything that you said in terms of how important music is for brain development. And I think what is really important for us to note here is that everything that we've been referring to in the last 30, 40 years as soft skills are now what we need as 21st century skills. And these are skills that we need to give our children at as young an age as possible. We need to teach them how to communicate. We need to teach them how to think critically. We need to teach them how to be good people. And it's such an easy way to do that through things like art and music and dance and theater. And I think the National Education Policy Report that has just come out, we were fortunate to work on the draft report, has really kind of leaned into the importance of the arts for all children of all ages. And again, I'd like to reemphasize the point that Anil made about how music and art is something that's so easy to integrate into the lives of all children. Even if you look at the Anganwadis, you know, it's something that you can really do. You can just go in there and teach a song, and then you're stimulating them in ways that they've never been stimulated before. And what we've seen through our work with children through so many years is that children respond to music at such a deep level. And I think this preconceived notion of, you know, music is not for everybody, or, you know, you have to be musically inclined, is something that gets put in at a later age. If you deal with teenagers, or if you deal with people who've never learned music or never interacted with it, this is what you get back. But if you're dealing with children, some of the most natural expression comes through song. And a lot of the work that we've been doing actually is working with amazing math and science teachers, trying to rewire their brains in a way to help them realize that they're musical too. We did this just fun experiment with a bunch of 50 math and science teachers from a very reputed CBSE school, which I should not name right now, where we had all these beautiful teachers from high school saying, you know, I love music, but I'm not musical. Like, my ship has sailed. I don't have the ability to be musical, but I appreciate what you're doing. And I think music is important for all kids. So we said, okay, would you just spend an hour with us and we'll do this kind of workshop? And what we did was we gave them a puzzle without explaining too much of anything. And then we said, okay, we're going to play 30 seconds of music for you. And you have these puzzle pieces in front of you, and just figure out what makes sense. And they're kind of dots and dashes, which is graphic representation of music, right? So a dot is a short note, and a line is a longer note, and then it's higher or lower. And then you have teachers kind of figuring it out, and you have 4 or 5 of them in the group, and they'll be like, hey, I know how this works. Wait, yeah, I figured this out. And then there's this excitement, and then the teachers are saying, play it again for me, play it again for me, play it again for me. And then in that small group, I think we played that song about 20, 25 times. And by the time all the teachers had got it right, and they figured out the puzzle, and they're like, we understand scientifically, we understand your system of notation, and the dots and the dashes work, and this is what it is. And then we're like, great, that wasn't the point of the exercise at all. And then we pulled out the lyrics. And it was Vande Meenakshi, which is a Notaswaram. And what the teachers didn't realize is when we put the lyrics up there, that they were able to sing. Because the moment you remove this feeling that it's classical music and you have to be taught and you've never learned it and it's not for you, and you give them something else to busy their minds with, they've actually learned the music. So I think it's really important and really beautiful to look at a way to integrate music and arts into everything in school education and not kind of keep it in a little silo.
Thank you so much. I think it's with a lot of credibility that you've given confidence to us as teachers that we can also try, and we're not far behind if we can decide to get into the world of music with our children. Otherwise, it's an awesome world. And when experts like you are around, Anil and you and Padmavati Rao, we get nervous as to whether we are capable of doing it. But you have given us that confidence, Bindu, that we can try as teachers. Thank you. Mrs. Padmavati, would you like to add anything more to the first question? Then we can move to the second one. Yes, please.
Yeah, just a request if we could just keep it as Padmavati Rao.
I'll do that.
Share all the titles, Dr. or Mrs. or whatever. You're right. So, yes, I'm in complete agreement. And before I start, a big thank you to everybody who's made this conference possible. I think it's one of great importance, especially at this time. And I completely agree with what Anil and Bindu are saying, simply because this is a reality which we all face. You know, in my own family, I have a brother who sings well, but supposedly, because I've never heard him sing. Only his friends have heard him sing, you know. And it's this monster of that we make of something just by saying that this is classical, or this is how it should be, or this is how it ought to be. And we make, I'm going to switch off my video so you will have no lag between audio and video. And so this is how it should be, or this is how it ought to be. And that becomes the normative way in which we come to things. And I think now is the time when we're going to have to
I think we have some issues on connectivity. Padmavati Rao, are you comfortable? Yeah.
I'm comfortable, but if there's somebody's mic on, I'm getting feedback.
No, I think we've all switched off. I switched on mine just now to help you out. But are you okay? Right.
Okay.
So I will.
Yeah, I'm okay.
Yeah, I'm okay. We couldn't hear a lot of your answer, which must have been really wonderful. But then we will move on. The next question basically is addressed to Padmavati Rao. A fairly long question, but an answer required. The arts subject group is often sidelined in favor of the more serious, I quote, serious sciences and commerce. Perhaps we as a society have not fully appreciated the value and the role of that arts can play. How do you think school principals can take the integration of the arts across to stakeholders of the school in very credible ways? Could you please share your experience with us, Mrs. Padmavati Rao? So if Padmavati Rao has connected.
So, yes, I
Go ahead, Padmavati.
Yes. I think this is a very pertinent question. We know that the arts need to be included, and the why of it is because, especially something like the theater arts, include music, dance, everything under the sun, simply because theater is all-encompassing. And it is therefore that I say that, you know, because I feel that theater evokes, true art evokes, it inspires, it doesn't just inform, because when you inform, then you're dealing only with the head. And if we are to look at the head, heart, and hands, then theater arts provide that platform where it includes on various art forms. Now the thing is, how do we do this? Because most people think, in most workshops that I do with teachers, if I ask them, do you think of yourself as creative? And they say, no, I'm just a teacher. I used to be just a housewife. Now I'm a teacher. And they completely discredit themselves with anything that has to do anything with theatre or creativity. And that is something that
Padmavati Rao ma'am, I think Padmavati Rao ma'am, I think your voice is breaking, so we're not able to get the content properly across. So probably this question, as you rightly pointed out, that it's very pertinent. I could request Anil Srinivasan and Bindu to take it up, because it's a question of stakeholders and how do principals actually manage stakeholders, because a lot of sidelining is happening to the arts in schools in favor of, the so-called engineering and commerce streams. How do principals do that? I request Anil Srinivasan and Bindu to come in and share their thoughts.
Audio is...
Anil, you got to...
Sorry? Yeah, can you hear me now? Yeah, okay. So I was just saying it's a pity we couldn't hear Padmavati ji, because I think at least I was trying to make sense of what we could hear, and she was basically talking about integration being an important thing. If I could, I'm just going to share screen at this point. I'm just going to share a particular idea. And just so bear with me for a second. Yeah. I hope everybody can see my screen. So one of the things that I keep talking about, Vasanthi ma'am, is that we have to be very specific about when we say art integration versus what we mean by arts and education versus what we mean by art in education. And there's a lot of confusion about it, even when I speak to our school heads. So art in education, I mean, the idea that we have a music period or a arts period in some of the schools, that is already there, and there's a teacher who's teaching art or teaching music or theater or whatever. So that is understood. However, that still goes back to what Bindu and I were referring to as silos, right? So where it's 7 periods of the more important subjects and 8th period alone is this for fun. So that's a very different idea. When we're talking about arts and education, there's a lot of confusion again, but there we're referring to the extracurricular spaces where it's after school activity. You can have different things which are offered. Some schools even offer it as co-curricular, etc. What NEP is talking about and what Bindu and I were referring to earlier is art integration, which means that art no longer remains in just a silo, but it also becomes part of physics class or maths class, etc. So how can I use the arts in STEM subjects? How can I use arts in languages? How can I use the arts in... So it becomes a part of everything that we do. It's the masala that I'm going to add to every dish that I'm cooking up, not just the specialized hour. So this is the first distinction that I want to make. And NEP is talking about the third one and not the first two. Okay. The second thing is that in our case, I'm sure Bindu will add insights from theirs. The way we did this is to break down, for example, the different skills that in the case of music, and I would say probably true for the larger arts, what are the different skills that we can impart using the arts, and then started mapping these skills to lessons, right? So if I have cognitive skill sets like thinking skill sets or logic or memory, or if I have affective skill sets or emotive skill sets like feelings and sympathy, or if I have procedural, how do I work in a team? What kind of teamwork skills do I need to learn? There are self-expression and creativity skill sets, which includes, of course, performing, which is a very important part of learning the arts, and also discipline and exercise. So what happens is that, so the numbers that you see in these boxes refer to the number of lesson plans or class lesson plans that can be integrated going by the class. So first class, second standard, third standard, etc., and how it measures up. Now, mapping this onto the CBSE syllabus becomes the next step, right? So if I'm doing art integration and I'm saying, say, typically second or third standard, we are doing a song on fractions because fractions is being taught in maths. The class plan will be not only talking about how fractions, what do they mean, but the music teacher herself or the maths teacher, as Bindu was saying, can be using this particular exercise or song to actually do an activity around fractions and a musical exercise or a musical song on fractions, which corresponds to a particular skill code with a specific learning outcome map. So in doing this, there has to be a class plan in which the integration of the artistic practice has to be done with the STEM lesson plan, right? So in that, for example, if I'm going to do all of this, there's also a song on the fractions that I will be teaching. So one of the ways of doing the song, of course, in music, fractions become very easy when you start introducing it with the concept of rhythm. So that would be the specific musical activity which will be explained, at the end of which the learning outcomes will be mapped. The reason that I bring this up is, of course, that this kind of mapping, where we go from skill sets, skill codes to what is in the syllabus, use both these mappings to then have a representation in art, goes back to what Bindu was also saying, and I've also been saying, which is that art is part of the maths class. It is not that it is kept as a separate period, Friday evening at 8th standard, it's optional and it's like extracurricular. No. It means that it becomes, so how do I do a fraction? And I'll do a simple exercise. Bindu, if you will indulge me, you could also join in, is that if I were to have a 4 beat, so I do 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's a 4 count. If I were to break that 4 into halves, I would do 1, 2, 3, 4. So then already 4 becomes 8, right? If I want to do 4 as 16, okay, that will be cootie claps, but things like that. That becomes part of the song that the maths teacher can use also in the fractions class, but the music teacher can also use. This goes back to a question, Vasanthi ma'am, that you asked. The maths teacher feels that this is too much. As it is, CBSE is giving me so much work to do. On top of it, now you're asking me to clap and sing and dance and paint. What the hell is this, right? So which is why, right, we have broken it down into things which are very easy for everyone to do, right? I do not expect the maths teacher to suddenly start doing Akshaya Linga. I don't expect her to do that at all. Please, that's not what we're saying. We're saying there is a list of exercises, a list of songs, a list of activities which are already skill mapped, which are already concept mapped, which say Rhapsody does or Sapa does or etc. Different. I mean, this is the reason that we are all giving so much of our lives into education, is to say that, look, this is something that anybody can do, and there is a methodology. So even what NEP is talking about in terms of art integration needs to be very clearly understood as something very different to extracurricular arts class. That is not what they are talking about, right? There is also another misnomer that there is a list of, so I saw the CBSE document on, the different projects and the different exercises. Now, again, that is not for us to go and tell the handwork teacher or the homework teacher, can you please do these models and keep it in the classroom? We'll take a photograph and send it so the checklist is done. We cannot do it like that, right? Every child needs to be taught how to do this. Every child automatically does this. We just have to empower and enable it. So the reason that I took a little extra time is to explain that there is a methodology to this, that there is a class planning, lesson planning, and tremendous amount of work has gone into concept mapping this as per NEP, as per NCF. So this is what needs to be applied, and it is not something random. There is also this other misnomer that, I bring a classical musician into the classroom and just make them sing, automatically art integration happens, nothing happens. Right? What happens is the children are so thrilled that they have a free period where somebody else is performing for them and they're having a ball of a time, right? And they don't understand. And not every classical artist is equipped with or classical or traditional performer is equipped with the ability to articulate at an age-graded level for a child. So if I go into a classroom and say, Tyagaraja Swami, by doing this, attained self-actualization. Now, to a third standard child, what does a third standard child understand in terms of self-actualization? Right? He's barely understood a cell phone. So I think we need to be very clear, right? One of the examples I keep using is fractions themselves are introduced only in the third standard, right? And Carnatic music or Hindustani music works in fractions, right? Even the simplest phrase, right? Akshaya. So even you talked about Vande Meenakshi. So I was going to say, Vande Meenakshi Tvam Sarasija Rukshe Parne Durge Na ta 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 ta. So it's again one beat broken into 4 or one beat broken into 8, and that's a fraction, right? To understand a fraction, the brain itself needs to be at the third standard level to understand why is that going into fraction. So using it at the time that fractions are being taught will be fantastic, because the child will make the correlation automatically. But if I take that lesson and take it to the LKG child, right, you have basically put him into deep water. Some of them will learn to swim, many of them will sink. So we have to be very clear, right, that it's not casual, right? Just as integration and differentiation is not going to be taught in the second standard, okay? We are not going to be doing the periodic table in the first standard. We should not be doing acoustics or sonic theory in LKG. You can't just do it like that, right? So there needs to be an age graded, multimodal, multi-genre, mapped syllabus. That is what NEP is talking about in art integration. Sorry, I'm sounding like a politician. I'm sounding like a politician. I am a politician for music. I am a politician for art integration. Vote for me. I'm done.
Yes, thank you. Yes, Anil, our votes are there for sure. And I think this is one of the most credible presentations I've seen as a trainer, where we are trying to drive learning outcomes to be connected directly with an activity that needs to be assessed and then reflected, upon for further improvement. And unless we do that, everything, like you said, would become fancy work of arts. And it's one of the most brilliant ways that you linked the curriculum. Thank you, Anil. And I'll ask Bindu if you can add on to that, Bindu, before we go to Padmavati Rao, ma'am. Yes, Bindu.
So what I really love about speaking after Anil is that I can just agree and be like, yes, Anil, of course, you're absolutely right. And then, vote for me too. I did hear a few bits about what Padmavati ma'am was saying before, and I thought they were brilliant. I just want to reiterate those points in case they didn't come out clearly. And ma'am, please jump in if I'm messing up. She said art is important because it evokes, not informs. And I think that is such a powerful thing to say, because it's not just about thinking, it's about feeling. And it's about, I think what we all try to do as teachers is create complete human beings. And that is very critical. One thing is being able to get them to match at grade level and understand all these things, and they have to pass exams and they have to be competent. And that is critical. I mean, I'm not taking away from that at all. But at the end of the day, all of us as educators want to create good humans. And we want to create humans who believe in themselves. They have to believe in what they stand for. They have to have social emotional learning. They have to be able to communicate effectively with others. So I think that was a beautiful point that ma'am made that I just wanted to bring up. The other point that I heard bits of, which I think she was trying to bring out, is so many times when she's worked with teachers, educators, they tell her, we are just teachers. And there is no such thing as just a teacher. Because teachers are the most important. They are the fabric. They're the ones who are holding up everything else that exists. If none of us would be here doing what we are doing today if we didn't have teachers, and I think all of us have been inspired so thoroughly by teachers, different teachers along the way, whether we're doing what they taught us or not, whether we're in completely different fields. Most of us have been inspired so heavily by teachers. What I'd like to add to what Anil was saying was I completely agree with him. And I'd like to bring out the point that when you look at math or any of the science subjects, or when you look at language, there is a curriculum in place. There is a framework. There are textbooks. There are all of these things that have been in place for so long. But yet when you look at music or when you look at dance traditionally, there's a sort of expectation that has existed that somebody who sings well will be able to come in unaided and create their own syllabus, their own curriculum, their own everything that is of the same quality of math, or that they can just teach songs and that's enough. So that's where I think people like Anil at Rhapsody and we at Sapine Schools have been working so hard to create that support structure which teachers need. If you're a great performer and you don't want to be an educator, that's fine. But what we've seen is so many of our great music educators are actually engineers by training. I don't know what it is about India, but you get in at kindergarten and you come out at the other side with an engineering degree, and then you start thinking about what you want to do in life, right? So we have these engineers who've been passionate about music throughout their whole journey, and then they come out on the other side with an engineering degree, and then they go back to their parents and they say, okay, this is what you wanted me to do, but music is what moves me. And then you have these engineers who want to give their lives in service of teaching music to 3-year-olds because they see the value in that. But what our responsibility, people like Anil and I, is to create a framework and a structure within which these brilliant educators can survive and thrive. So for us also, it's been about creating the textbook. It's been about creating the methodology. Even if you look at how you deal with children of different age groups, if you take a bunch of 3-year-olds and you ask them, okay, children, I'm going to teach you something. Now you sit straight and you stop talking. And that's just the best way to shut them down. Whereas if you take a group of teenagers and you'll be like, all you guys and your modern ideas means nothing. So it's all about understanding how you reach a point of communication with your students. And I think so many of you brilliant educators do that intuitively, but it's our responsibility to make sure we create a foundation on which anybody who wants to be a passionate educator can do a good job. If we look at having textbooks that are mapped to different skills, if we look at the fact that we try to build global citizenship through global music, we look at the power of language. We teach children how to sing in like 15 different languages before they reach grade 1, because I haven't done as much research as Anil with the brain, but I've done a little bit. It's so important for kids to have access to different languages at an early age. We start losing the ability to learn language from the time we're 6 years old. And we retain some of those benefits if we're able to sing in those languages. I mean, there is research that shows if you hear a language for the first time after the age of 11 years, you'll never be able to speak it as a native because you've lost the ability to hear the nuance of the language. You may be grammatically perfect. You can write novels in that language, but you have lost those neural pathways. You've lost those micro abilities to learn and appreciate that language. Whereas if you give children at a very young age access to language, then they retain those benefits. If you look at how to convince stakeholders, which I think was your original question, we've had issues in government schools where we've had parents come and say, I'm working in the fields, so my daughter will learn mathematics. Why is she singing songs? Okay, and we've had to deal with these issues because they're very real issues. And then you see that same parent after a point of time saying, I realize my child is more calm. I realize that kids in school are not fighting so much. Feedback we've received from outreach schools is that attendance increases on days that they have music education. And the beautiful thing is, I see that Anil is speaking purely on the scientific, mostly on the scientific benefits, which allows me to talk about the softer side of it. But I think what we're saying integrates really well. So it works on both sides. It works if you're telling them, we do experiments with frequencies where you take, the string quartet, you take the violin, you take the viola, you take the cello, you take the double bass, and all of them look the same, but then they sound different. Why do they sound different? Does it have something to do with string length? What is it? Is it frequency? What makes this? Is this lower? Is that bigger? What does string length tell you? So you get kids to start thinking critically. You get them to start thinking scientifically from a point where they're excited about the newness of it, or the magic of it. What is it? And then they come to a point where they start thinking scientifically, where they want to understand it. And I think another thing that the NEP has brought out really beautifully, and I hope we can explore in more detail in the future, is when they look at different streams in secondary education. I think the arts should be a very important stream. If you look at kids in high school, they're very clear about what they want to do, and we need to give them opportunities to do everything. I agree to that. But making everybody do the same thing just because we think that it's necessary for everyone to have this level of skill set is probably something that we need to move beyond. And I think it's easier now to have all stakeholders on board, because I think all parents, if you look at what's happening now with Byju's and White Hat and the different opinions on that, you have so many more parents now, you have so many more school leaders now, you have so many educators of non-music subjects, music educators, all agreeing that children need holistic development, whatever you call it. If you call it 21st century skills, if you call it well-rounded, if you call it access to everything, if you call it global citizenship, everybody is agreeing that our kids need it. So I don't think it's so much of a hard sell anymore. You don't really have to convince people as much that they need to learn these things that just make their lives better.
Thank you so much, Bindu. I think, thank you, Bindu. I think there's so much of the scientist in you and in Anil, coupled with your music brilliance, that actually lends a lot of credibility to what we are listening to as teachers, And I'm sure this is going to definitely strike a chord with teachers across who are listening to all of us now, especially the two of you who spoke now on this very sensitive area of credibility with parents. brilliantly put across by both of you. And Anil, you can add on. And before that, I think Mrs. Padmavati Rao has added her notes in the chat box because of her internet issues. I'll read off that, Anil, and then you can add on probably.
I just wanted to read that.
Yeah, do that, Anil. I'll be very grateful to you for that. Please go ahead. Wonderful.
No, so I just wanted to add what Padmavati ma'am has said, because I think it's a very brilliant thought that all educators should listen to. And she has written on the chat box that imagine learning everything through art forms, but without scores, replacing marks cards with certificates of experience, creating a world for students where there are no failures, but unique people with different abilities, skills, and expertise. We need theater for children to be made mandatory. Theater with children need to be a choice. But I think the 2 points she made about experience, and also what Bindu had said earlier as well about evoking, as opposed to the way we generally tend to be evaluative about everything. I think that's basically what I wanted to add. But also, Vasanthi ma'am, in answer to your question, 3 artists have answered the question in such a complimentary way. Okay, you talked about stakeholders. Padmavati ma'am spoke about the educator's perspective. I spoke specifically on learning outcomes, which speaks to teachers, and Bindu spoke with respect to parents and reach out. Okay, so all 3 stakeholders were covered by the 3 of us. So I think that answered that question.
Absolutely, absolutely. Bang on, Anil. Thank you. Because of the time factor, I wish we had another 1 hour to go and it would have been wonderful. But we are running short of time, another 15 minutes, but we'll try to make the most of it for our viewers. We have a question now coming directly to Dr. Bindu. I'm so glad that, Bindu, you mentioned you were part of the NEP, the design of the NEP. The question here is, how do you think the interpretative thinking and lateral thinking in the regular classrooms can be promoted through the class? You already answered a large part of it, but then can you add on, especially when it comes to science and maybe literature for that matter? Students need to interact with the textbook and interpret, not simply comprehend. I think you got to go beyond comprehension and interpret text, because that's what makes them lifelong learners of interpretation anywhere in any context, isn't it? So could you add on, because you've been part of the NEP, it will be wonderful to have your thoughts, and then Anil will add on, and Padmavati Rao, if she can join us, it will be great. So please go ahead, Bindu. This question is actually for you.
It's very unfortunate that I have to speak before Anil right now. I think a lot of it was answered by him, and ma'am, you answered it as well. But I think it is really important to look at arts as somewhere where we can improve lateral thinking, because it is meant to be so creative. It is meant to be open. You use the example of literature. What we've seen with a lot of our kids is, if you look at every young child as a songwriter, it's actually a beautiful thing. I mean, if you take a very simple song, I know Anil was talking about Happy Birthday. My favorite song to talk about is Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, right? So if you say Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, then you ask kids, have you ever heard another song? And this is really small kids. This works with 4-year-olds, 3-year-olds. Have you ever heard another song that has this same melody? And then they'll think for a while and they'll say, okay, Baba Black Sheep. And actually, this is easier to ask kids than it is to ask adults, because adults will be so fixed to the idea that Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star sounds like Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, and nothing else in the world can sound like it. But if you have little kids, they'll tell you Baba Black Sheep sounds the same. They'll tell you the alphabet song is the same. They'll tell you Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star is the same. And then you start with, do you think there could be a 4th set of words that would work for this melody? And then you start unlocking creativity before you tell them what they're doing. So if you, and then this is a skill that carries forward throughout. Like, a lot of my songwriting students have done exceptionally well in language, because they're able to do things like Pressy writing better, they're able to do poetry writing better, they're able to do critical writing better, they're able to analyze, because every time you write a song, every time you break down a song that someone has written, it's about, what do you think that person is saying? What do you think that person is really saying, right? You've got a verse, you've got a chorus, you've got a bridge, you've got a pre-chorus, but what is in the words and what is between the words? So the moment you start looking, and for some reason it's easier to do, it must have something to do with what Anil was saying at the beginning about stimulating 90% of your brain. It's so much easier to do this with a song than do it with something that's in your textbook. Or if it's a song that's in your textbook, even better. So we have kids looking at music from all different perspectives to start with. And when you build those skill sets without even telling kids that this is something that they have to do or they need to do, the teachers need to know that. The educators need to have these beautiful charts and maps, and we have handouts, and our lesson plans are kind of detailed down to what can happen in minutes, what are talking points, how do you lead kids. But for the kids, they don't need to know any of this. They just need to know that they're having an extremely positive experience. So when you use things like songwriting, you unlock the power of lateral thinking, you unlock creativity, you unlock critical thinking in language forever. Similarly, when you're using experiments like understanding frequency, understanding different elements through music, you're giving kids an opportunity to think outside the box, as we would say maybe a decade ago. And we've also, like, we've used, I love the fractions example. We've been doing a lot of LCM. If I count in threes and you count in fours, if I am doing takita and you're doing takadimi, where will we meet? Okay, our 3 and 4 will meet together at 12. What does that mean? So I think it's all about being very experimental and being very application based. So you're able to bring the things that are very important in your textbooks to life. And I think that's always the way education has been intended, right? It's moved from having the Gurukula system where you're sitting under the tree and you're learning to say, okay, now we have the ability to write. Maybe we should just be writing down a few points so we're able to receive better. And then from there, it went to, okay, let's not disturb the children with writing down these few points. Let's put these few points down in the textbook. The textbook isn't God. The textbook is a way for us to tie down what it is that we want to communicate. But the real learning is what happens between the teacher and the students in the classroom. And it's been extremely hard to do this online, but I think somehow all these millions of educators out there in the world have done a phenomenal job of doing this online. But I think the critical thing to remember is the learning is what happens between the teachers and the students. The textbook is just there as an additional help.
Thank you so much. I think there's a beautiful blend coming from you and Anil together on this. And if Padmavati can join us on the same question.
Yes.
And Bindu, it's very obvious you've added a lot of value to the NEP document this time, right? Yeah. So then Anil can add on. Padmavati, we just have about 7 minutes to close the session. And we have 1 or 2 questions from the audience too. So we'll take Padmavati, and after that Anil will add on the same. And then probably the question from the audience. Is that fine? Yes, Padmavati.
Yes. So quickly, I have a great concern when it comes to student suicides, and we don't seem to touch that. And we need to consider that. And the one way that we can do that is through the arts, and the theatre arts offer the platform for music, dance, and everything under the sun, because it is all encompassing. But we can't rely only on technique and method.
Excuse me, ma'am. I think your voice is breaking quite a bit. Padmavati, we're not able to hear you. I think your voice is breaking. So if you could put it in the chat box again, because your thoughts are so valuable, we'll be glad to read it off, because I think there is an issue with your net connectivity. You could put it in the chat box and we'll be glad to read it out to the audience, because a lot of valuable thoughts must be coming off from your experience, ma'am. Please. Yes? Are you able to hear me, Padmavati Rao? So Anil, can you take over at this juncture? This is the question which I asked Bindu. It was more on the interpretative thinking and lateral thinking, Anil. And then Padmavati Rao could type it into the chat box and we could read off. So Anil could take off at this point. And then we just have 6 minutes to go. I thought at least we'll answer one question. Maybe I'll tell you the question so that Bindu, you can think of it. It's more about since schools have become inclusive today, it's no longer exclusive. There is inclusivity in schools. That means there's all kinds of children can now enter our schools. They could be challenged in more ways than one. There's nothing called a normal child anymore, I think, in educational circles. Everyone has got their own challenges. So how do we then, have you got experience, both of you, in, integrating arts in an inclusive classroom, where you have children who are challenged in more ways than one? So that's the next question coming up from the audience. But I'll ask Anil to quickly go ahead and speak on the previous question that Bindu was answering.
Okay.
Thank
so, I will say Bindu is also a hard act to follow. So I think both of us are sort of, Bindu is completing my sentences and I'm completing hers. So we are essentially saying the same things. Because she said, twinkle, twinkle, little star, I'm going to quickly do something. Again, playing is better than talking. So Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star for me is a great example that we use in standard 6, 7, and 8 to talk about lateral thinking. Okay, because when Mozart composed this, okay, the idea was that he not only composed the tune, but he composed variations on the theme of Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. So the idea of, so we know the tune, but the variation is, and so on and so forth. There are like 12 variations on this, but the idea is when we play it, we use it to say, okay, what are the isotopes of carbon? So what are the variations of carbon? So we have theme and variations. So then immediately the child starts coming up with diamond could be one, coal can be one, charcoal is, and it starts becoming very interesting because then we are having this entire discussion on theme and variations. Now, is the physics teacher or the chemistry teacher expected to do this? No. But the chemistry teacher can still use, if you have a smart board, you can use the music clip and then activate the brain in order to start thinking about the idea of variations. And we usually get fantastic answers. So music and any of the performing arts actually directly go into lateral thinking. It's a very, very easy connect. But even on that, without boring everybody, I will say we have copious concept notes. Rhapsody has it. I'm sure Sapa has it. We're happy to help at any time. I'll do a quick precursor to your second question before handing it over to Bindu. I take exceptions on two things. I think every child is special. I think this differentiation between normal and not so normal, I think first of all is outdated and we must remove it. Because I can certainly speak for Bindu and myself, Padmavati ji too, because none of us were considered normal when we were children. Okay, and that doesn't mean that we are not contributing very productively in any case, because half the time I was sitting in the music room, I was never attending to my lessons. So the point is that who defines this normal? So I think we must first get rid of that definition. And the second thing is that differentiation in terms of income. So when we start talking about children coming in due to RTE and things like that, I believe that children have their own ways of coping, and they rise up to whichever challenge you give them. Children rise up to it. The problem is adults who stand in the way of them growing normally. So it's the adults who have the problem, not the children. So I believe again in music and of course the greater arts are great equalizers, because those automatically provide the same equal platform on which every child is automatically the same as every other child. There's absolutely no differentiation. Talent can come from anywhere. Lateral thinking can come from anywhere, and so can this idea of musical intelligence or artistic intelligence come from anywhere. I actually find that with greater art integration, we just touched our 477th school. I'm working with nearly 500 schools today, and I can tell you that the schools, in terms of performance outcomes, it is the exact same. When I look at the data coming out of government school, that's coming out of a private school, it's the exact same information. There is absolutely no difference. I think we must normalcy and abnormalcy.
Thank you. I think we need to read off Padmavati's answer from the chat box, Anil, and we'll try to squeeze in a question if we can in this last 1 minute. One thing is, Padmavati talks about we'll have to integrate processes that address the human condition, treating each individual as unique and finding the child within. This process will have to be done with educators first, so that the issue of homogeneity and standardization, which lead to benchmarking and scoring, are the monsters in each one's life. And if we are to build a wholesome society, we'll have to work this way with our schools. I think there are wonderful ways to close on that question. The last one to go, I think we've already almost done. It was about the syllabus, The worry is that if I were to integrate, the arts, what happens to covering of the syllabus? The truth is syllabus has to be uncovered. There's no question of covering it, right? So very quickly, maybe 10 seconds, or it's very difficult to answer, but teachers are concerned about the syllabus. How do I cover it if I'm going to do dance, music, and all that in the class? You've explained adequately that you could reach far more learning outcomes than your regular ways of teaching. So very quickly, Anil and Bindu can take that. The syllabus. Are we going to compromise on that?
Sorry, I'll do a 10-second and then over to Bindu, because Bindu should add on to the previous question as well. And I'm going to say that the syllabus is only going to get covered faster if you use the arts. It doesn't get slower. Think of the example of chini mein doodh mein chini. Okay, so the arts is only adding sugar to the milk, and it's going to help the milk get consumed much faster. It's not going to make it slower. And sometimes it's in the form of just 2-minute, 3-minute exercises that you're going to integrate into your class, which is the exact same time that you also need to take a breath. It's not that we are talking continuously for 35 minutes. So sometimes even the time that we take to tell children, keep quiet, sit down, everybody, fingers on your lips, instead of that time, if you actually play this clip or you actually do the art integrated exercise for those 2-3 minutes, that discipline is automatically going to happen. So in no way does it impede progress. That's it. Bindu, over to you.
I 100% agree with what you said on this. I think that it adds, it doesn't take away. So it's not an additional thing that needs to be finished. It's something that adds on. I'm going to take a second and go back, as you suggested, to the earlier question. When we look at neurotypical children, which I guess is the fair way to refer to them, but I agree with Anil that all kids are special, versus neuroatypical children, there is so much research that shows how children are benefited. We've had so many kids on the autism spectrum in integrated classrooms, and we've seen how music has helped them. I mean, there is an example of a child who kind of lay down in the back of the classroom for the entire year, and the other teachers kind of left him alone, and our music teacher was told to leave him alone as well, because he manages in his own way and don't disturb him. And this child lay down in the back of the classroom for an entire academic year. At the end of the year, he made a choice, and this is a KG child, made a choice to tap the music teacher, not look him in the eye, but then he sang the whole book. So when you look at children on the autism spectrum, when you look at children with special learning needs, there is an immense power that comes from music, because they connect so deeply, so strongly with it. The other thing I'd like to reinforce, and I completely agree with Anil on this, is when you look at kids from underserved communities, disadvantaged backgrounds, however we want to term it, music is so critical for them too. And it's an area where they can really shine. If you look at a child who comes from a semi-permanent structure home where they're living with sheet roof, how hard is it going to be to allow that child to compete at a level as a computer engineer? What are the skills that you have to give that child? What are the materials that you have to give that child? Whereas if you give him the power of song, it's equal. So I think it's really important to look at how powerful music can be. And even in schools that we work with that have struggled with RTE, we have found that the music period has been something that can kind of break this down, because you have kids who come in from different linguistic backgrounds, who are not always fluent in English, who are not able to survive in the normal classroom, who don't know what's going on. As music educators, we have a privilege of allowing them to speak in mother tongue in our classroom. We have the privilege of allowing children who speak that language to sit together, to group together, and to kind of break down the barriers that exist in the minds of children because of the adults around them. It might be the other parents, it might be somebody else, but this feeling that these kids don't belong, music is a very powerful way we can break that down.
Thank you so much. We're running short of, we exceeded our time, but I think every minute of it has been worth it. I'm sure everyone here has found immense value. I have to quickly read off Padmavati's contributions to this last one. Imagine devoting each year to creating creative pieces and learning the arts and the sciences, even math through that. And she wanted us to share this. And with those words, we come to the end of the session, rather reluctantly, to the end of this absolutely information-packed session with immense takeaways. Thank you, Dr. Anil, Dr. Bindu, Mrs. Padmavati. I'm sure these valuable nuggets will find their way into school plans, where authentic and meaningful integration of the arts will happen and open new vistas of joyful learning for our students. My gratitude to the audience for their involvement by raising some queries for clarification. Thank you all so much once again for your very valuable presence here this afternoon with us. Thank you. Namaste. Thank you.
Thank you. Namaste.
Thank you.
Namaste.